So thanks a lot for coming today. Today's kind of an exciting day in so many different ways, and now is one of them. We're going to be bringing Barrett Brown in live from Texas, and it's really nice to have him out of prison. I really enjoyed his prison writings a lot. I felt kind of guilty when I would read them sometimes, because I was like, I didn't want him to have to have been in prison for him to have written this, but I'm really enjoying reading it. So, oh well, I'll take it, you know.
And he won the National Magazine Award while in solitary confinement.
And he just won the National Magazine Award while in solitary confinement, but he won another big thing recently that I can't remember. Anyway, he's continuing to win awards on a regular basis for his writing, would be an easy way of saying that. And so he had some ideas for some software and that he thought about when he was in prison. And as soon as he was out, Steve hopped on a plane to go meet with him and was made the project lead kind of instantaneously, and the rest is kind of history. And we invited them here today, and they're going to show us their software, and it is democracy building software. It's more of this theme that I'm trying to get through people about this whole hackathon of combining our forces all over the world and not stopping. Let's keep this going. And Pursuance is one of these tools to help you connect with the other people that want to fix the things that you want to fix. And I'm really excited about being able to launch it here. So I'm going to let Steve take over and let him introduce Barrett for you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Lisa? Everyone hear me okay?
Huh? Yeah.
Audio's good? Audio's good. People can hear me?
Turn him up.
Great. All right. So thank you, Lisa. Excellent to be here at Aaron Swartz Day. I'd like to first start on a sort of personal note. So 2 years ago, I was in Santa Barbara, and I saw some tweets from the Tour Project, and they said, oh, there's going to be this gathering. It's called Aaron Swartz Day, and like, here's the amazing speakers that are going to be there, and here's the amazing talks, and here's the projects. And I thought that sounded so compelling that I immediately came up here to sort of visit. And I was so impressed by the people at Aaron Swartz Day that it convinced me to move to San Francisco. So 1 year ago, I come in, there's like, not many spots available. I sit down, there's one person there, I said, hey, what's your name? He says, Micah. I said, Micah Lee? Like, so in the Intercept and like all this stuff, yeah. So that was really exciting. And then Roger Dingledine from Tor was chatting with Bram Cohen, who invented BitTorrent, just hanging out. Like, that's pretty neat. Maybe I should be exactly right here all the time. So a year ago, I did move here. And then since then, I've been doing weekly Saturday hackathons every 4 to 10 p.m. at Noisebridge, sort of modeled after Aaron Swartz Day. And then since then, been able to recruit for projects. And then just a few months after that, I read a Wired magazine article, said Barrett Brown's out of jail and he's doing awesome stuff again. And I read this post from Wired, and it says, Barrett Brown is envisioning this end-to-end encrypted environment where you can like collaborate with other like activists and journalists and people who are trying to change the world. And I thought that sounded ultra compelling. So I immediately reached out to him in like 5 different ways: snail mail and Twitter and email, like all in parallel. And I got through in just 2 days. And then I jumped on a plane and flew to Texas to meet Barrett. And like Lisa said, things have been happening quickly since then. So thank you, Aaron Swartz Day. All right, Barrett, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, let's talk a little bit about your background. So Lisa alluded to some of it. So you won the National Magazine Award, but let's go back to maybe like 2010. You have the sense that we should be using the internet for like activist type things. You have all these people online, even if it's just a small percentage of people who really care about issues. I mean, there's billions of people online, so that could be quite the force. So take me back to some of your thinking around that time, kind of right before you started doing work with Anonymous.
At that point, I'd been a journalist and media critic, specializing in ways in which politics deteriorates because of the failures of information, the failures of the press. And so my emphasis was on those particular issues. At the same time, like a lot of people, I was becoming aware of the potential that existed latent within the information age, also aware that this was not being harnessed. When Anonymous began doing things like Church of Scientology protests in 2008, that obviously was a proof of concept. That meant that you could, in this day and age, as a few people with no resources, launch a massive campaign against a powerful institution and get results. And this was done very haphazardly, all the anonymous stuff was. I was wondering if we could systematize that sort of thing. So Project PM began in 2009. I recruited a number of people, academics and programmers, activists, some of whom are still involved in this new project. And we were putting together a framework for bloggers to better communicate and better perpetuate actual information within the kind of broken information stream that this nation relies on, as well as a civic network for non-media people to better do the things that need to be done in any society. That kind of got put to the wayside when I got involved with Anonymous in late 2010. They were supporting the Tunisian revolution. They had a number of figures in Anonymous who were also major figures in the Tunisian revolt. One of them later on joined the government. And what happened there was obviously another great proof of concept. And from there on, we got into this conflict with the intelligence contracting industry, the U.S. surveillance and intelligence community. That's what we started focusing on with Project PM. We put together another proof of concept, a crowdsourced research project to continue to go through these stories even after the press had abandoned them, to make sure that the materials that leakers and hackers put out regarding these secret programs were actually analyzed and presented in a way that any journalist could take the ball and run with it. And we were successful enough that the FBI listed Project PM and our website on my search warrant when they eventually raided them. So went to prison, got out. The ideal is still there. The society our institutions are more broken than ever. Things have changed in terms of perception, such that some of the people who I think still believe that the structures we have are sufficient to continue this republic as a moral enterprise, those people have now started to realize that there is something fundamentally wrong that cannot be fixed within the usual processes. And so there's a subset of those people who also do recognize that the internet, that we live in an important age in which the environment has fundamentally changed, in which for the first time in history, any individual can collaborate with any other individual across the planet without an intermediary. And that's an extraordinary change in the basic building blocks of society. And all of our institutions grew up in a very different environment in which that collaboration was limited, and thus institutions had to arise. So we're at a period in which we have to make sure that we get to this first. It's almost like a space race or a colonial kind of thing. We have to ensure that the internet is working for the open society, because the people on the alt-right, the national populace across the world, totalitarian regimes, our own increasingly authoritarian republic, they're paying attention to the internet. They're making great strides in using it for surveillance and for espionage and for a number of propaganda apparatus that we've seen here and elsewhere. And so it's important that we figure out the fundamentals quickly and start getting people brought onto a single program where they can maintain their independence while also having an unprecedented agility in terms of organizing.
Okay, so clearly agility is very important. So you started talking about like the haphazard way that you and Anonymous were operating. Like tell us about some of those challenges you faced, right? Like before you described like there's one giant chat room and one disruptive person that you couldn't really kick out, could cause a bunch of issues. You mentioned that in our first or second meeting, and then there was a wiki. Wasn't me. Who did it? Who is that? Annalise? No? You don't know? That's pretty good. Rob? There's 3 people in the chat. It's me, Barrett, and Rick Roll Dude. Can we kick him out? Wow.
Anyway, so Anonymous, like Project PM and like Telecomics and a lot of these early groups, necessarily had to use infrastructure that was already there for other things. Internet Relay Chat, IRC, being the chief among those. they had no other alternatives. The IRC was the standard. It was already kind of culturally the chosen venue of the kind of people who were involved in sort of things, and everyone else came on as well. These aren't made for activism. They're made for chatting, and communication is obviously a big part of it. But the nature of these large crowds that were working together in these groups, and the nature of the IRC kind of combines to provide a medium in which, yes, a lot could be done very quickly. It had a lot of pros, but the cons, over time, a lot of the deterioration anonymously went through, not just because of outside interference by the FBI, by foreign intelligence agencies and companies. A lot of the self-deterioration, the sort of arguments and drama that any movement is subject to, those things proliferate. Those things are kind of those things grow. They always grow within that kind of environment. So the question was, how could we keep the same agility, keep the same ability to bring on large numbers of people very quickly and put them to work and ensure that people with good ideas get those ideas heard, and that none of these bureaucratic structures arise like we see in a political party where the smartest people are oftentimes in the middle or bottom. How do we do that? And how do we do that without how do we find the right mixture between an institution and a movement? And so that was one of the key questions we were trying to answer with these structures. And I think we've tackled in a way that will be the gold standard for organization from here on.
Excellent. Okay, and just one more sort of a background thing. So there's 70,000 emails that allegedly Jeremy Hammond grabbed and put on the internet, and Project PM, that you organized, went through those, and you want to talk about the arguably criminal conspiracy that you uncovered that involves WikiLeaks and Bank of America and whatnot, and how that probably led to your being targeted.
That H.B. Gary release, which Anonymous stole from the servers of this intelligence contracting firm, was illustrative in several fundamental ways. Most obviously, very quickly after they were brought out, they uncovered the Team Themis conspiracy, in which the DOJ had set in motion a series of actions, some of which are quite illegal, some of which are borderline illegal, in which journalists supportive of WikiLeaks, as well as left-wing activists opposed to the Chamber of Commerce, would have been pursued by all of these clandestine means: harassments, disinformation, setting them up on fraud charges by these firms, again with the complicity of the DOJ. Sorry, with the complicity of the DOJ. And but after and that was a big story for a month or so, and it was on Colbert, and NBC had me on, and I talked about that. They forgot to actually mention what we uncovered. They just talked about the hacking, because that's what's important to them. It's NBC. And so as always with these media structures, a story doesn't necessarily get pursued till the real end of it. It doesn't get pursued to such a point in which the actual civic purpose of journalism has achieved something. It gets pursued until such time as editors and producers kind of collectively decide, oh, that story's done. Meanwhile, there's 70,000 emails still sitting there, and we've already found these extraordinary pieces of information in there. So Project PM the intention was to pursue these because of the other illustrative thing about this, which was that even as this unusual circumstances arose where the nation at large and CNN and New York Times are all reporting on this conspiracy that was unveiled, there were no real consequences for those involved. Palantir, which was one of the firms involved in this, continued to gain influence. Peter Thiel is now more powerful than ever. The actual employee that Palantir put on leave originally, as sort of to try to blame it on him, he was later promoted. So we see here how both the state and our media, as currently constituted, are just not up to this task of discovering these stories. And even when someone discovers it for them, as Anonymous did, and as we did by pushing this and giving you the emails, they're not able to run with the ball all the way. And so later on, we uncovered some more programs, including Romas Coin, that I wrote about for The Guardian, that we put up on our website. We had probably dozens and dozens of people over the next year and a half research, all volunteer research, new journalists, people with think tanks and foundations here and in Europe, who did a great job of compiling all this thing, and it made it a very unique resource. But the fact of the matter was that even with all this documented, when there was a call in Congress for an investigation into the DOJ and into these companies, committing these extraordinary crimes against democracy, frankly, that investigation was shot down by Lamar Smith, the Republican from Texas, who actually just retired a couple of days ago. He said the DOJ should be the one to determine if a crime was committed. Of course, the DOJ was not in a hurry to investigate this since they had created this. So that was another illustrative example of why these kind of things are needed. We have these structures that just are not up to these tasks. We have to build our own structures, and we've seen we've seen the proof of concept on different levels of activism, launching campaigns, crowdsourced research, working with journalists to try to strengthen the immediate structures. We've seen them all work to some extent, even with these haphazard associational groups that pop up. Now let's see what we can do with a systematic version of this. And obviously, we can expect that we can do quite a bit more.
Awesome. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about sort of the first wave of online journalism. So you're starting to say that, like, we need to keep the agility. We need a large number of people to be able to collaborate. It sounds like if people are causing trouble, you need to be able to kind of kick them out and have the good people, productive people stay. Okay, so let's start talking about Pursuance then. So Pursuance obviously is supposed to be the something you've been thinking about for years now, and something that we'll be demoing, the first live demo of Pursuance ever in a few minutes. Let's talk about Pursuance. So what is the Pursuance system? There's several ways that we've used to describe it. It's a sort of ecosystem of people using the Pursuance system software in order to collaborate in various ways. We want to amplify the efforts of activists, journalists, and nonprofits. So, what are ways that you like to describe Pursuance?
Well, let's start with a couple of descriptions we've thought up, because we've tried to kind of explain this with the elevator pitch, and it takes a lot of terms, frankly. It's a very wide, very broad framework. So it can be thought of as sort of a combination, something between a political party and a union, less overtly political, less specifically political in a political party, but more ideological than a union. It's a collaborative framework for civics. It's a digital ecosystem for collaboration. It's a number of things all in one. Fundamentally, it is a framework whereby a certain population of individuals are brought in, each of whom, having been brought into the system, all have the equal rights to do several things. One, they can start their own pursuance. Pursuance is an entity that, once formed, has a sort of, let's say, a DNA/constitution. That's determined by the person who creates it. It can grow out, expand in different ways after that. And there's many different ways in which that expansion and in which the delegation of powers can be done. Because this is a network in which everyone has the right to create these pursuances, that makes it okay for anyone who creates one to govern it however they like. And anyone who wants to join on to, for instance, pursuance in which a single person is directing 3 other people and they make all the decisions and everyone else is kind of volunteers. People who want to join that can do that. People who don't can create their own very similar pursuance doing the same thing, but as a full democracy. So it's hard to get into some of the fundamentals of this without a diagram, but just think of it as an open space. Think of every user as a circle, and think of the pursuance itself as a square. Circle creates a little square here. He determines this pursuance is for prison reform. We're going to go about prison reform under these broad methods that I've thought up so far. And I've created 2 positions linking off from me. One is public relations, one is research. And I'm giving both those people agency to bring on whoever they want under them and structure it however they like. They could bring on 10 people who themselves can bring on 50 people altogether, blah, 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 so long as they do these functions that I've set out for them. That's one way of structuring. And so that's basically what it is. Now beyond that, there's lots of extra details that we've added, especially in the last year, starting with your meeting when you came down to Dallas, in which we started coming up with a lot of ways in which this can work even better than that would. I mean, I think that on itself would be an improvement in a lot of ways over IRC, for instance, or Facebook or Twitter, not least of which because it's not run by government-friendly entities, but also on an organizational platform. But when you start looking at the other things that we've added here, the different options by which the same structural shape can actually work differently, the options by which pursuances can, once formed, collaborate with other pursuances, creating either informal or formal connections to trade information, resources, that kind of thing. When you look at the ideas of crews, where we have pursuances that the purpose of which is to, at different times, provide a particular service to more large-scale pursuances, like let's say we have a crew of designers or coders, and there's groups that are just NGOs or there are entities that have been created here, and occasionally they'll need some digital campaign design done, or occasionally they'll need copyright, or occasionally they'll need coding. Those crews make themselves available to them, just as happens again in a more haphazard manner in an anonymous IRC or anything else, where some person is known for particular skill. You go to him and say, hey, we want you to make this design, this slogan, blah, blah, blah. So eventually you have, with the kind of people we're bringing on here, you have this proliferating ecosystem that expands as each participant helps it expand. The other method by which it's populated, besides us bringing on people on our own right, is by virtue of each participant being able to bring on others. Anyone who comes into the system has a right to bring on some number of other people over time. We haven't figured out the exact parameters of that. It may be, you may be able to bring on 5, and then a month later we can bring on 5 more.
Right.
We're trying to toying with the ways in which we think that will best keep the quality up. But bottom line is, the reason this can grow perpetually without us being worried about it, doing the kind of things that institutions do when they grow, or doing the kind of things that movements do when they grow, without deteriorating, as they often do, is because we've sort of worked in several mechanisms into this that kind of self-correct. Just an example of what we're trying to avoid. Reddit, I noticed back in 2009, had been for a couple of years a very, probably the best platform, the best medium by which to get information in this society. That's because you had a very erudite, sort of early adapter usership at Reddit for the most part early on. The threshold for knowing about Reddit was such that you tended to be a software engineer or a writer or whatever. And so people submitting articles to Reddit, you go to the comment section, the comments that get voted up tend to be something, if there's a critique that's needed of the article, you'll probably see that critique there. You'll probably see a link saying, oh, this article actually misstates this. Here's a link to an academic paper showing this.
Right.
It was an extraordinary resource. But over time, and you'll see this is similar with other movements and structures, the average user quality does go down. And that's not because everyone who comes on after a certain point is lesser than the original occupants, but that does tend to be what we've seen to be the process. There does tend to be a lower usership. So we solve this by a number of ways. We'll discuss those in a bit, but that's what we sort of have our eye on here. How can we build something that grows, an ecosystem that can grow and pursuances that can grow and expand over time without us having to worry about what will this become later? Is this going to become, is this going to become part of the problem? That's something we're able to avoid to an extent, I think, beyond anything else, any other structure of movements, because we've had the advantage of being able to see how these things work over the last 10 years very closely, sometimes from the inside, and we've kind of solved to some extent the problem of the debilitation that comes with growth.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about what the sort of goals of pursuance are. Right. So there's various sorts of injustices. Anyone who's especially internet connected, seems like 90% of what we see is negative. So there's tons of problems. Prison reform is something that needs to occur. There's the drug war that's a huge problem. Mass surveillance, many other issues. So others you'd like to touch upon that you think in particular Pursuance should lend itself well to when it comes to pushing up against these various injustices, in addition to the crowdsourced investigative journalism that you mentioned. I think that's a good one as well.
So there's obviously a focus that we've had in envisioning different kinds of pursuances, a few of which we're actually going to create in order to help get things started. Prison reform is one of them. We'll go into that later. Crowdsourced journalism, we've seen how that can be done. We've created some examples that we'll make available soon, I believe, on our website of how a journalist can use this, can come in, bring on 2 people that he, maybe a college student or whatever, 2 people he trusts to, not waste his time, and give them the ability to bring on a big web of people under them, so that if a journalist wants to research a topic, he's able to convey this message to his 2 people under him, saying, hey, we're looking into we're looking into campaign financing, and I need to do a story on this aspect of it. They send the message down to everybody. Everyone now knows we want information on this particular thing, and they can collaborate however they will. But the alternative to that, the traditional way that's done, the way it's been done for hundreds of years, frankly, without really fundamentally changing, is you have an editor, and you have a journalist, and you have a fact checker, maybe. As someone who's been a freelancer for a long time for a lot of publications, I can tell you that process is far from ideal. You can never expect 100% accuracy from any outlet, but outlets in general have not really been trying because there's really no impetus to it. They can get things wrong here and there. People generally don't know, including the editors themselves, unless it happens to be your industry or your field that's being discussed. But at any rate, editors and journalists and fact checkers should not be expected to be able to know what the best place is to look for information. They're dealing with sources that may or may not know what they're talking about themselves and may or may not have an agenda. And that's hard to catch. Anyone who's been covered in the press, like I have, I've had the unique position of being a journalist who has been the subject journalist. So I've been able to see how errors creep in, how they get repeated. Journalists copy off each other quite a bit. You can't blame them, they don't make much money. So this model, we think, is not just something that'll work better, but it's something that we can actually convince journalists to try. We have a partnership in the works with Russ Baker, who's on our board of directors. He's a great journalist, formerly for the New Yorker, former board of the Columbia Journalism Review, founder of Who, What, Why, which is an outlet that actually, I've noticed them when they wrote the first extensive, comprehensive, and accurate article on my case that I'd seen for a year after my prison. I was very impressed by that. Anyway, there are people that are interested in these kind of things, and so we're going to have journalists there kind of serve as guinea pigs on these projects. So people out there who, they want to see better journalism, and they happen to know things. Right now they're tweeting stuff like, hey, that's wrong. Yeah. They can actually, they can join a couple different journalists, and every once in a while when the thing comes down, they can have a chance to go find something and say, look, here's, or help fact check a story. This is something that can become common. It's something that it's good for journalists, not just to be accurate, which may not matter to a journalist depending on his moral character, but it does help them get things done faster and quicker and better, frankly. So this is something we can sell journalists on. And that's what we look for is how can we not just think of ideas that work better, but think of ideas that can be implemented that will gain mass acceptance. Another example, any NGO, nonprofit that exists right now. There's a great quote that we bat around by Rich Foxrey, who's the founder of the Pirate Party in Sweden. He wrote a book a couple of years ago. I haven't read, but I've seen a passage from it. When he's talking to the head of an NGO or some such, and he's telling him, the problem you need to be worrying about is not the people that work for you. The problem you should be worrying about is the thousands of people that want to work for you, but you don't let them. Yes. The Pursuance system is going to allow any nonprofit, large or small, to quickly create a Pursuance presence. And from there, without putting in a great deal of time or effort or money, no money whatsoever, frankly, they'll be able to actually mobilize their existing supporters, mobilize the people who are right now writing $10 checks, but who would like to help, here and there on something that will be meaningful. So we're going to, at a time when we need a lot of the NGOs like the ACLU and that kind of thing, when those people are dealing with an expanded field of problems, we're going to help give them a vastly expanded field of support. So it's very similar across the board. Anything that's been done, any of the campaigns in terms of, SOPA, that legislation that a couple years ago was brought down in large part because of this cooperative emergent campaign by the internet community. Those are things that can all be better pursued with journalism, right? Traditional activism, digital activism. And then we have a lot of specific examples that we'll talk about later on that'll kind of give you a better sense of what we envision. And we should also keep in mind that as we provide these examples, the people who use this system are going to think up an extraordinary array of new techniques on addressing existing problems, as well as thinking up entirely new procedures to address them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's like forward-looking people initially on Reddit. I mean, we should be able to harness that same sort of dynamic with Pursuance, and in particular, the crowdsourced investigative journalism. Kind of like you said, it's sort of revolutionizing the way journalism works. They don't have tons of money. People want to volunteer. It seems like there's a good match to be made there. So, okay, in one of your articles recently, Barrett, you said, "It is an absolute certainty that, with sufficient thought, a new mechanism may someday be designed capable of integrating thousands of talented individuals and existing organizations into a sort of parallel civic ecosystem." Let's see. Final comments related to that quote, and then I think we're about ready for a demo, and then we can do more comments after that, and then I have some slides to go into some details about the Pursuance system and sort of how it works and our next steps. Do you want to key off of the epic quote of yours that I just mentioned?
Right. So So we have a lot of sort of somewhat ambitious goals with this. I mean, we're all pretty much agreed that this is something that will kickstart activism as we know it, very soon with very immediate results. But over the long term, we think there's a lot of gaps, there's a lot of vacuums that are there to be filled, and that as we provide more proofs of concept, as we see some successes with this, and as this thing naturally grows, and grows at the same time more nuanced, better structured, as people develop better pursuances. They figure out more efficiently how to organize people to different tasks. And as they take advantage of our data library, by which anyone who creates a pursuance or a structure of a pursuance for a particular task can submit it to our central library, provide some notation on how this worked and why. Other people can draw from that, improve it, onward, resubmit it, so forth. With these several methods of evolution that are kind of incorporated into the system, several other methods of growth, this is something that ultimately can challenge the most powerful institutions in the world, just as movements in the past have done so. But we're going to increase that tempo. We're going to ensure that even if not everybody's on the same page and marching to the same drum, they at least have the option to do so to whatever extent they want to. So building a platform that's really going to unify the open society people who oppose the police state, people who oppose the surveillance state. We can do that if we ensure that the people who come in will have their independence and only have to unify to the extent that they choose to. And when you have a large population that's in broad agreement on some of these larger issues, they'll be able to work together on that sort of overlap of issues that most well-informed people agree with: the drug war, corporate welfare, leaving behind whatever disagreements they have on other issues. So this is something that's intended to counter the sort of splitting that occurs in activism and in NGOs, and to by sort of offering them a carrot to the extent that they can get more help, they can get more support, they can bring on more people here, and they can work with other groups vastly more easily. In large part, not because they're present, but because the way pursuances are generally structured, you can see what they're doing. You can see what they need, what you need, or what they have, and approach another pursuance and say, hey, we're both doing this kind of thing. Do you want to share information? That process, as it goes forward, is going to create something, a sort of superorganism that will be formidable in global affairs. That's something that can happen in 20 years.
Awesome. Okay, so the last few steps have been, sort of taking your vision, and then over the last 7 months, I've been I did 16 hours of user interviews to make sure that kind of combining Barrett's vision with the problems that existing activists have had in doing activism, making sure that we're solving as many of those as possible with kind of the smallest and simplest possible feature set, and making it all secure and encrypted, sort of combining end-to-end encrypted task management, various gamification elements, real-time chat, the ability to kind of ask for help, and various other things that I'm excited to show you. So shall we do the first live demo of the Pursuance system?
Let's do it.
Woo! Awesome. All right, let me just pull this thing up. And I'm going to screen share with him. All right, cool. All right, you can see what's on my screen? Excellent. So this is Pursuance. If we go to our dashboard, here's different pursuances that we are a member of, right? A pursuance is like a group of people who, each particular group has its own mission. So prison reform, right? People are trying to oppose various issues with prisons, and then there's like a FOIA network. So people who are submitting, right, freedom of information requests to the government to try to, understand what our own government is doing with their own money. So here we have the prison reform pursuance, right? So there's the reason why this sort of task management feature is core is because if you want to have a large number of people that are collaborating, being able to break up an ambitious goal into smaller and smaller pieces that people can individually do, that's an extremely important thing. So if you use a Trello or Redmine or Asana or things like that before, task management in general isn't super popular. Most of them are very clunky. Pursuance is the only task management system in the world right now that allows you to very rapidly create structured tasks. So if I say, okay, we need to apply to foundations, and then within here, I can just press tab, and then MacArthur Foundation, and open philanthropy, that's a good one. And then if I press tab, here we see different people that we can assign this task to. And people who are familiar with task management are used to, okay, you have a small team, right? What is a team? That's what many of these pieces of software call it. A team is a small group of people. Everyone knows each other's names, everyone knows each other's skill set, but something that Barrett realized is possible, and that we sort of put our heads together and figured out that something that could empower, that could sort of enable this ecosystem of these different groups, is to be able to assign something to another group. So you can imagine having like this, you have this like nested list of tasks. The high level things are typically very ambitious, and if you break those down into pieces, you can imagine having 10 different groups that you assign different things to, and then within those people subdivide, and then you have all these people playing their strengths, different kinds of people leveraging their individual skill set and their interests, and having these different groups kind of help each other. So what's the other thing here? So the ability to, let's see. Okay, so that's kind of what task management looks like. It was kind of subtle, but I have a karma score up here in the upper right, and that was increasing as I was performing activities. So people are used to karma as just kind of purely a social status type of thing, like it is on Reddit. But a feature that we will be adding to Pursuance is the ability to create a task, specify the skills necessary to complete that task, and then have the system automatically find the best person in the ecosystem to do that thing. So this is important because right now, if you want to do kind of large-scale activism, you have to personally know, or if you want to do impactful activism, you have to personally know all of those people, and you have to know all of their skill sets, and like know who to kind of go to for various things. But if you have a good idea and you can get an invite to one of these pursuances, and then the ability to just kind of instantly hook into people with various expertise is, without having to build that sort of yourself, is really powerful. So karma points is a social status thing, but it also can make the system more efficient. Notifications wise, so if we look here at the top, so for the last few months I've been kind of watching the way this kind of pool of activists that Ray Johansson, our international coordinator, has collected. He knows many thousands of activists. I'll mention him a little bit more later. We have a couple of chat servers where people are doing various sorts of activism, and in seeing them operate, I couldn't help but notice all the time that, yeah, sometimes you have chat messages in, like there's nothing but chat messages in the chat software, but there's things that are not really messages that we pretend are messages because we only have messaging, and there's not as good of tools out there as what we need that sort of combines some of these features together. So what they keep doing is kind of saying, hey, can I get a signal boost on this? Like, can you retweet this? Can you sign this petition? Can you post this to Facebook? Something like that. So I realized that we should have those separated out, right? It shouldn't just be in this sea of messages. There's like conversations, there's different conclusions people have reached, there's things that you're being asked to do, and it's easy to lose all these things, right? So being able to say, hey, can someone signal boost this, and then have this kind of action, like kind of, we have like 5 different names for it, we're still choosing it, but like having this sort of action broadcast where it's not a normal task where you have one person do it once. There's things like, again, retweeting things where you want as many people to do it as possible. So having those separated out and saying, hey, can people please do this is useful. So being able to go here, Marty, I'm retweeting this from your account. I hope that's okay. I'm using your laptop for this. All right, and then, okay, I did this, so I got 5 karma points for that, and then what else? So I was mentioned in a chat room, so if we go there, we should see this. So this is like sort of a sub-project of Pursuance that we've been working on for a while called LeapChat. Anyone in the world can go to leapchat.org, do end-to-end encrypted chat in the browser, and it looks kind of like this. So once we add one more feature along the right panel there, which is black to match our theme, we'll have like kind of the details of the task that people are discussing, right? So, you know, you assign something to me, I want to ask clarification, having kind of a full chat room and have everything in Pursuance be real time is definitely something we've aimed for. So yeah, so this is what we got: the ability to do end-to-end encrypted chat task management, real-time chat. You know, as you can see along the left here, the ability to like share files, share documents. So there's two kinds of pursuances. There's public ones and private ones. Private ones are where everything is encrypted, all messages, all tasks, all files. And then there's public pursuances, which we'll have it be where it can be invite only or not. You know, if people want it to be more like kind of a subreddit, but where people do things instead of just talking about things, then they'll be able to do that. But yeah, this is what we got. That's Pursuance.
All right. So we'll open it up for questions. If you guys,
I have some slides to go into a few more details, and then
before questions,
and then comments from Barrett, and then let's do Q&A after that. How's that?
Okay. I kind of wanted to make sure nobody had something burning they wanted to ask after the demo. No? Okay. You are free to go.
All right. Thank you. All right. People see stuff. All right. So, who here would like to be one of the first people in the world to try the Pursuance system? Awesome. So let's see, Annalise and AJ and Kevin Gallagher, can you stand up real quick? Or Kevin might be downstairs. So talk to either me or one of those two, and we would love to do sort of a user test. So like making the interface as intuitive as possible is something that we care about a lot. A lot of things that are security oriented blame you if you can't figure out the software. I want to take a page from the startup world, and we blame us if you can't figure out the software. So this shouldn't have to be a computer geek to use software that sort of protects your privacy. We also set up a special page for Aaron Swartz Day. If you go to pursuanceproject.org/ASD, ASD for Aaron Swartz Day, that's if you prefer not to talk to AJ and not to talk to Annalise or me or Kevin, please feel free to go to that site, and you can specify your email and see if you're interested in trying stuff out. So what is the sort of process that we went through to get here, right? So I collected lots of various insights, and then we had pretty early on Ray Johansson, who's part of the Pirate Party International board of directors. He's also on our board and our international coordinator. He made it really easy just to have this like amazing pool of activists in the chat server that I mentioned earlier that I could just draw from, and we decided, okay, which people do we think would get the most out of Pursuance? Who do we think would who would benefit most? Who's kind of going to be representative of the kinds of activists that we want using this? And I talked to a bunch of people and synthesized those insights down into a small feature set. Then I made really ugly wireframes that other people I'll mention in a minute made look good. Recruited some developers. We built stuff. You literally wouldn't believe how much of what you just saw was built in the last 3 weeks by 4 people. So good job, Marty Muhammad and Sebastian, kicking ass. So I just mentioned there's public and private pursuances. Private ones, everything is encrypted, and I made this point a few minutes ago. Like things like these other tools talk about teams. They picture all these silos of small groups, and that's not what we want, right? We want these different groups that can coordinate between each other. So this is a quote that from Rick Falkvinge's book that Barrett mentioned earlier. Your most valuable asset isn't your employees; it's the thousands of people who want to work for free, and you don't let them. So that is very much how we see things. I sent Barrett that quote, and he was amazed that at least one other person sees the world the way he does. So normally, to get these sorts of features, you have too many different things you have to deal with. So we're going to take a page out of the book of Proton Mail, which does something pretty cool, right? So if you have your normal Gmail account or something, and then you create a Proton Mail account, when you get a new email in your Proton Mail account, they will notify the email address that you're used to checking if you tell them that it exists. But in that notification, they don't say who the email is from. They don't even say your email address that is kind of like your Proton Mail address that's relevant to that email. It just says, you have 3 new messages or something like that. I think that's really powerful. So with pursuances, if you don't have to put your email address in at all, just like username and password. But if you do specify it, the emails that we send will just say things like "you've been mentioned," or kind of telling you there's something you should go check, but not saying what it is. And of course, in most cases, people will be using private pursuances, and in that case, our mail server won't know what you're being notified about. All of that information will be encrypted for private pursuances. So again, the ability to assign stuff to other groups is important. The ability to kind of say, hey, I need help, and kind of broadcast a message out there and say, and kind of, the goal, right, is to efficiently direct resources. It seems like everything is just a giant chat room, and it's chaotic, and people don't have what they need. So the ability to assign skills based on tasks, I alluded to that. And there's a sort of encryption technique. It uses encryption based on some research that I did that I presented at the DEF CON Hacker Conference 2 years ago. We're going to leverage that key idea for pursuances. So basically, in each person's profile in a pursuance, they will specify various skills, and we will sort of encrypt and hash those skills, and the server will have this sort of identifier that represents a skill, but it won't see what that skill is. That makes it so you can assign things to people based on skill set without revealing to the server what all of your skills are. If people listed literally every skill that they have, I'm concerned that could start to de-anonymize people potentially. But rapidly creating structured tasks, I mentioned that. That is very unique. If you're used to Redmine, you can very slowly and painstakingly fill out this giant form, and then wait 3 seconds for the page to reload, and then you can make a second task. That's no good. And then there's things like Asana or other task management things where you can quickly make a list. But we really want to enable people to do much more ambitious things than most systems permit right now. So being able to start with a high-level goal and break it down to as many small pieces as you need to, so that where each of those things leads up to the ambitious thing that you're trying to achieve. So when I use these other systems, it seems like it's just too hard to do that. And if you need one thing to be done before you can do something else, there's generally good luck doing that with Trello, right? It's just a big pile of things to do. So we will be adding federation. So this is a question we get a lot, right? So it's okay, you have a pursuance system server, and all this is open source, of course. You have this server, you have a bunch of people, you have many pursuances on that server, you have people collaborating through it. But the concern that some people have is well, that could be a single point of failure if everyone is using this one thing. So we will be adding federation so that you can you set up your server, I set up my server, and we can optionally have them peer with each other. I'll be talking about that in more detail tomorrow. I think it's 2 to 3, more of a technical deep dive on pursuance tomorrow. So, but having multiple people be able to kind of collaborate through multiple servers as if it's the same server, that's a feature that a lot of people said they want. We're starting off with so that we can iterate very quickly and kind of deploy multiple times per day if we need to. We're going to kind of start with we're about to start alpha testing. That's very exciting. Iterate on the interface and build out some more of the backend stuff. There's some encryption stuff that we still need to add, and then we'll be bundling this stuff as mobile and desktop apps. So there's a technology called React that allows us to kind of reuse about 80% of our code that's for a web application and bundle that into a native application, like a app that you would install on Android or iOS. And there's something else called Electron that lets us bundle that into a desktop app. So we're excited about that. So AJ and I the other day were brainstorming about a plugin system. We think that could be really powerful, and So it wouldn't be like a full like app store probably, but being able to kind of augment the functionality of Pursuance in a very dynamic way, so people can add the functionality they want and do that securely, is something that is exciting. Like I said, being able to use karma points combined with the skill-based assigning of tasks is a powerful combination. So of course we're only using crypto that has been like either, it's all open source, it's either thoroughly audited and or written by a crypto expert. There's no reason for us to roll our own crypto. That doesn't make any sense. We want to use existing solid crypto libraries and then build this kind of, build secure app on top of it. Every Pursuance will be accessible as a Tor hidden service. So in the kind of normal kind of server like distribution of Pursuance, we'll make the default config such that that Pursuance is available as a Tor hidden service. And of course, if you combine that with the idea of federation, you can have kind of normal, like ClearNet, like internet Pursuance servers that can peer with Pursuance servers that are Tor only, because all of them will be on Tor. Let's see here. And then other security stuff, secure headers who our JavaScript can't like talk to other domains and stuff like that. So we care very much about usability. So that is not common enough in secure software, right? So like PGP has existed since 1991, and I'm not sure that anyone's really made a reasonably easy to use interface for it. There's some stuff that is there's things like Mailpile that is like mostly done project and the UI is good, but I think they ran out of money. And then there's, I saw not an interview, but like a conference of the creator of PGP, Phil Zimmerman, and he was still mocking users for being idiots for not being able to figure out the pain in the ass of command line stuff. I thought that was quite a sad thing. It's been 26 years, quarter of a century, can't build a usable interface for PGP. All right, that's wonderful. So we're avoiding those mistakes by talking to real users. And like I said, pursuanceproject.org/ASD is where you can directly help with that. So another issue has to do, another accessibility issue, right? It's like you can have some amazing piece of software on GitHub, and it's like non-technical people could really benefit from using this. But how are they supposed to deploy it? You have stuff that's in Git, you have stuff that's online. So it's like you shouldn't have to be a Linux systems administrator to like figure out how to spin up a DigitalOcean server or Amazon Web Services or whatever, and then SSH in and configure things. That's not how it should work. But people do in various cases want to have their own server that they have full control over. Right? I mean, like the current solution to that is like you don't have to run your own mail server, but Google hosts all of it. So the uptime is really good, but there's some privacy loss. So anyway, there's all these trade-offs. So one thing that Pursuance is going to be doing is if there's like any sort of group of people and they're like, we're non-technical, but we want our own server. Well, we can run some scripts and like spin people up their own server, and we configure it and just kind of hand it to them. And then just like with like WordPress or something, people just access it through the browser. The first account that gets created there is like administrator and stuff like that. So that should make it more accessible for people to kind of have their own server while being non-technical. So yep. And then so December 1st, we plan to start a Kickstarter campaign. So that will be very exciting. We'll be announcing that via our mailing list, which now has over 1,100 people signed up for it, thanks to Barrett's writings and Rain Coaster, a couple people we have helping us out. So if you go to pursuanceproject.org, there is a form there where you can sign up for the mailing list. And as of like 2 hours ago, we have a donation page. So pursuanceproject.org/donate. People feel so inclined, that would be awesome. So another thing so like a key theme that I noticed in talking to people who kind of help coordinate a large number of activists is they kind of keep having to do manual work that it seems like you should be able to partially automate. So they'll like tell someone to work on something, and then if they haven't worked on it in a while, they'll have to notice that, and then they will have to like remember to message them again or like reassign that work or something like that. I'm excited by the possibility of being able to kind of automate or at least semi-automate as much of that as possible. So if you could tell the system, assign this task to somebody, and then if the status of that task doesn't change and there's like no sign of progress in like 3 days, then like automatically reassign it to a new person who has the right skill set or something like that. You can imagine the system being kind of self-healing in that way, where if individual people drop off or people are less reliable, then we can kind of automatically reassign stuff, and then the karma, of course the karma points will help with that, right? Like who's getting things done. We will add a feature so that on people's profiles, sort of LinkedIn style, like, you know, if you do a task and there's like 3 skills that were required for it, you should get like a +1 for each of those 3 specific skills that you have, because we know that you did something that requires those skills. So that's another aspect that should make this more efficient over time and have it be kind of efficiently self-healing in ways that I don't believe exist in any other system. So there's something that Barrett briefly alluded to, this sort of pursuance library. So Barrett realized a long time ago that, like, okay, if you have these different groups and there's overlap in what different different groups are doing, then when one group figures out like some way of operating that is a lot more efficient that they kind of stumble upon, then it would be great that if someone else came along and tried to do something similar, that they could somehow automatically benefit from that without having to kind of start from scratch. So we're still figuring out like what some of these kind of variables are that we can kind of harness. I mean, we talked about, when you start a pursuance, you're sort of like you're kind of like the god of it, sort of like a dictator. If you want to like invite people and give them very high privileges, then you should be able to do that. And we've designed a pretty elaborate permission system based on the feedback I got from various users, where there's about it's not just kind of admin and normal user, there's about 6 tiers. And the lowest one being like if there's somebody that you don't necessarily trust that much, but you want to see if they seem good, you can invite them to the system, and then they will only be able to see the tasks that they have been assigned. They can't see what anyone else is working on. And then there's encryption that sort of backs this up, where there's kind of different categories of tasks depending upon kind of the permissions level of who's working on it, and those are encrypted with different keys. So blah blah blah. The person with the least privileges can't get a crypto key that can like decrypt a bunch of stuff in the on the server, even if they got access to that information somehow. So anyway, having a pursuance library where like one group sees like a certain tree structure or a certain kind of subtree of tasks is is like one way to effectively break up the work for like accomplishing something. We're going to make it so they can optionally donate that to the pursuance library, and then kind of try to show that to people in the right context. So if they're trying to accomplish something similar, then they can benefit from that work that people have figured out. So another thing that we'll be adding is the ability to, so I was talking to different people about what they want. It's like, okay, do you want to kind of give someone a lot of trust initially and then they can abuse it, or you like invite them and they don't really have many permissions, but then they like can't do things that might be useful? And it seemed like a tricky dichotomy of like, should someone be able to create tasks? Should they not be able to? And some clever person said, well, what if they could just sort of suggest tasks? So they have an idea, it doesn't kind of automatically get added to what the official work is that people are going to do, but it is an idea that like admins can check. And if this person keeps suggesting good ideas, then that can be this kind of intermediate step where you can be like, okay, this person seems good, I'll let them just like add stuff automatically. And something I didn't mention about karma points that is useful is, so many of you here will be familiar with the notion of a Sybil attack, where if one person can kind of create many accounts, and then there's various ways that those could be abused, right? Like if you can kind of upvote things on Reddit and kind of game that system, or retweet things and make something trend that like really isn't trending. It's like a very small number of people, or it's something that shouldn't be trending. So there's issues there, and people will be getting karma points for people kind of upvoting work that they've done. But based on some research that that Annalise Burkhardt, who's part of the core team, figured out is if you have this sort of barrier to entry, or even after people join, they need to kind of do a certain amount of work in order for their kind of upvotes to count. That is, anyway, that's one kind of a security-ish dynamic that we're leveraging. So I wrote an equation out that I'll probably show tomorrow during the deep dive. That's like, you know, you need, like, if you have fewer than 50 karma points, you can upvote people's stuff and try to, you know, upvote your friends' things and try to make a bunch of accounts or get a bunch of invites and keep upvoting stuff to try to game the system. But until you've done significant work on like any of those accounts that you have, then it'll look like you're influencing things, but you actually won't be. So what are some likely early pursuances? So like I said, we've been able to talk to an impressive kind of network of activists, and there's some really interesting stuff out there that we're excited to help out with Pursuance, and they're very interested in using it. So there's this woman, Erin Gallagher. She is working on a kind of unmasking Twitter bots via social network analysis. So, you know, kind of a common problem these days, right? So you have a bunch of tweets and it's like, that's probably an automated account, or that's some sort of automated troll. And, you know, I didn't realize it, but I sort of implicitly accepted that, you know, it's like, I'm not going to be able to have access to like Twitter's data, and you just kind of see people's messages. It's hard to figure out kind of what's going on. She, you know, sometimes it's very hard to tell what is a bot and what isn't. But sometimes you really can't tell. So Erin has done some very interesting visualizations where you can see like the networks between different people. And she said she noticed that when something is a bot and it's sort of more obviously a bot, then it will kind of only interact with like with the other bots that it's kind of part of the same kind of cluster with, that are kind of controlled by the same user. But a real human will be interacting with like a more kind of, you know, like a broader array of different users. So she's very interested in having kind of data scientists and some math people and researchers help her and kind of, you know, improve the math, improve the visualizations, and, you know, make it so we can understand like who's actually a person and who's kind of gaming various things online, especially through Twitter. So that's very interesting. And just, I think yesterday, for the Internet Archive, she created a social network data visualization. So, and she has, where did I put it? Here's the link, medium.com/Erin_Gallagher. She has like various blog posts, and she's like, okay, here's a visualization of the Unite the Right hashtag, and these people seem to be bots, and those people are real. It's very interesting. And when it comes to like swaying public opinion by pretending that a majority really believes X, what they don't, like I think this is a big deal for democracies and like understanding reality and what people actually believe.
So Steve?
So another early pursuits that we're excited about, there's something called anti-spy bill that the Internet Party of New Zealand is working on. So they told me a list of things. I forget most of them, but there's some things, various things historically that have kind of originated in New Zealand. I think they said women's right to vote, indigenous people's rights, and a few other things. And they said that when there's like a new kind of mass surveillance, I don't know, technique or something that is being tried out, it will be sort of prototyped in New Zealand, where it's like, I think it said 4.5 million people. And then if those techniques work there, then they will tend to spread throughout the Western world. So we want to do kind of the opposite dynamic, where instead of something you know, bad originating in New Zealand and then spreading throughout the West, we would like to have this anti-spy bill that they've drafted that is like protecting, you know, civil liberties, protecting right to privacy in particular. If that could get passed in New Zealand, then that could be a big deal, and they're interested in using Pursuance to kind of organize all the people who want to help see that happen. Basic income has been, I mean, encrypting stuff, yeah, I mean, like,
not just encrypting stuff, but I mean,
I'm saying protecting data is good regardless of where the data lives. So like there's GDPR ramifications, I guess, that like we will be in compliance by, you know, not storing stuff like user data, private data, unencrypted. But I don't, like I said, I don't know the full extent of what they require is in terms of protecting privacy. But you know, we should be doing a lot more than what is just legally required. I mean, you know, end-to-end encryption should be, again, the norm. Things should be encrypted at rest. That's how the world should work.
All right. Thank you. Anybody in the audience have a question? Oh, I have to go very far.
Hello. Thank you for your speech. Just curious to know, what do you think would have happened if Edward Snowden had had access to the technology that you built?
That's very interesting. So we mentioned PGP being a huge pain. So I mean, like, so what? Let's talk about the Snowden scenario, right? So what happened there? Edward Snowden anonymously emailed Glenn Greenwald and said, "Hey, I really have some documents that you need to see." And Glenn said, "Okay." And Snowden said, "But like it's really sensitive stuff. And so you need to like generate a PGP key pair, and you need to like, you know, send me the public key, and then I can encrypt stuff to you." And there's just like back and forth, and it's really hard to do. Snowden said fairly recently that he made all these instructional videos so that like Glenn could like figure out how to do it, and it was still too like painfully hard. So then Snowden went to like Laura Poitras and Michael Lee, I believe, and then said, you know, and then like they're more technical, so they were able to like use PGP, and then they went back to Glenn Greenwald after that. We almost lost the Snowden story because PGP is so fucking hard to use. That is literally true. So that's, you know, that just shows how important usable security is, and that's great.
So yes, it would have helped.
Focus. So
right.
You know, so if you could have I mean, if Snowden could have like had Pursuance on his own server, and he creates this like new domain, you know, nobody knows about it yet, emails Glenn Greenwald and says, "Hey, I have these documents that you should see." But with Pursuance, he would have been able to say like, create like a long like username and passphrase, and don't tell me the passphrase, and then basically create an account for Glenn on that server, and then Glenn signs in, and then Snowden could have already uploaded all of these documents.
Wait a minute, Steve. You're not saying that using Pursuance, for instance, would be as safe as, say, uploading something through SecureDrop or using one of these complex systems. That's just what I'm hearing, and I'm sure that's not what you mean. So what do you mean?
So I mean, once we have native apps, then that will be the, like, you know, with everyone using native apps, I mean, that is a secure way of doing things. So there'd be more configuration involved, but like you have a native app, you point it at, you know, the server that you want to like log into, and I mean, stuff is, you know, end-to-end encrypted, and like I said, SSL and open source crypto, and that's really good. Like one of the key things that SecureDrop does that is awesome is when people read the documents, like on the journalist side, you know, they're set up with like an air-gapped laptop, so that like if the documents being uploaded are actually malware, like SecureDrop helps a lot with that. They also have some server hardening stuff. I don't know all of what they.
So how do you handle malware?
But I mean, Ben's question was like, you have, you know, like you're comparing PGP, like the usability of PGP and security PGP with like more modern stuff. So yeah, we can do a lot better than PGP, and when everything is native apps, then, and people trust the software, then yeah, it's very secure. Okay,
so what's the next step? And Barrett, I want to ask you a question while we've got you. What do you think the next step is when people, what's the takeaway when people come out of here in terms of using this thing, getting ready to use it? There's a little bit of organization in one's own mind before they think about these projects and how they would even set up one of these pursuances. And with the functionality that you guys have already, what do you think the next thing is people should do if they want to use this thing?
Well, one important aspect of that I want to make sure is clear to everyone is that what you see when you're using Pursuance is this very visualized environment, you know, of physical pursuances. When you start creating a pursuance, you're seeing these structures as you build them, and it makes it easier to envision. You know, you start out with Pursuance, you create a couple of connections, a couple of roles to join. From there, it becomes easier to go step by step and say, now what do I need now? I've got a research guy and I've got a public relations guy. And everyone has a choice with Pursuance. Do I want to design how this is going to grow myself? Do I want to go to the data library and see what else has been done? Or do I want to organically just create these roles, people that I trust, and allow them to create that next step? Decide, how is this research guy going to handle his research? Is he going to divide it into two different sort of networks doing different things and not communicating? Or is he going to, are they going to be all working together on topics at once? And there's a lot of sort of subdivisions on how that can work. That's especially so because there's so many settings that you can choose from aside from the structures that change how how it exactly fits around in a very robust, large-scale pursuance. One feature I should note in relation to that, this kind of gives you an idea. We have a lot of features that we don't have time to discuss, but this gives you an idea of the kind of problems that we're looking at and that we've somewhat solved. When you have a large pursuance, let's say you have a core group and you've got hundreds of people out there that have been brought onto this pursuance over time. Just like with any organization, any institution, you have this difficulty that comes across when it becomes cumbersome. Somebody who's working in the mailroom at a company may have a great idea, and that's happened throughout history, but doesn't have a way to relay it to the CEO or vice president. The default setting on one of our pursuances, or on pursuances in general, is that anyone who's brought into a pursuance has one opportunity to send a message to anyone else on that pursuance, including the person who created it, one of the chief third people if it's structured that way. And if that person who receives it likes the message, you can renew that ability of that person to send another message. It could be an idea, it could be pointing out a problem, anything. So that helps to counteract the deficiencies that come with growth in large networks. And that's one of many different settings you can sort of tweak. As you create a pursuance, as you visualize it and expand it and run into problems or find new efficient ways and research into the data library for others to use. That's one of many tools we're putting in people's hands so that we're not having to try to envision how these things work. People on the ground doing these activities, building their pursuance, they'll have about many opportunities to tweak that pursuance with a particular task they're doing. And that's something they have to take into account. It can make things more complicated, but importantly enough, this is a very easy system for someone to use. Remember that I designed it, and I'm not technical at all, even though I'm sometimes called a hacker or a security expert by news outlets. I didn't know what a 0 day was until I was being told. So it's something that the appeal should be anyone can use it, and that anyone can use it for anything, in any way that they find is most effective. And that's very important to us, putting this forward.
Sure.
All right, great.
And Lisa, just to add one more thing to what you mentioned. So I had a very interesting conversation with MC McGrath the other day, also known as Shadash, some of you may know him. He and I and Freddie had a meeting, and he works on Transparency Toolkit, and he was like, when it comes to like kind of full kind of pipeline of like what activists can be using, he's like, here's what we should do. And there's no formal partnership or anything, but he's like, here's an idea. We should have secure drop be used to, like in the most secure way, like you said, accept documents that are sent, like anonymously or over Tor or whatever, and then take those documents that were uploaded through secure drop and send them into Transparency Toolkit, which is what Shadash is working on, and have them like scanned, OCR'd, make all the documents searchable and like index them and whatnot. And then we should use Pursuance to kind of break up the work in terms of like which journalists or which researchers are doing, like dealing with which parts of which documents to write various reports. So yeah, I mean, I think these things are complementary for sure. So you mentioned secure drop. I wanted to mention that idea. Several people have asked us about secure drop and being able to integrate. So yeah, we're interested in adding all kinds of stuff over time and integrating with existing projects.
Okay, great. We got one more question here from the audience, and then we're probably going to wrap it up here.
Hi. Congrats on the launch of the prototype.
Thank you.
So I'm really excited about the project management features that you talked about. Mm-hmm. I can see it being useful for lots of nonprofits that are doing like organizing on the ground events mm-hmm. that are people powered, or even for like open source GitHub projects.
Right.
I guess I jot down like 3 quick questions, which is one, are you planning on like dog fooding your own project where?
Absolutely. Like, I'm like coordinating with like dozens of people, and I'm like, man, if only I had some tool to like break up work between different people efficiently and assign tasks, that would be great. So absolutely. yeah, like we tried to use a couple other things like just momentarily, and like there's a bunch of issues. You can assign stuff to like 5 people, and of course no one does it in that case. Like there's all these, I don't know. So
yeah,
yes, we're dogfooding a lot. We'll be switching some more stuff from Mattermost to Leap Chat once we add a couple more features. And that's just the chat thing that we've been using some. And then, yes, we're going to manage Pursuance with Pursuance.
Yeah,
Pursuance itself is a Pursuance. That's how meta we get around here.
Yeah, very meta. Yeah, the feature that stood out for me was the ability to match volunteer skill sets with a particular issue. That sounded really cool. My other question was, are you planning to, you mentioned integration just now, but there are, I guess, nonprofit CRM softwares out there, maybe like Salesforce or like Action Network, et cetera, where these organizations, they already have, like they already track who signed up as event organizers, who's volunteered, and I was wondering if you were planning on potentially integrating with them, because sometimes it might be difficult for them to figure out like a Pursuance user and how that user relates in their organizational history.
Right. Yeah, and it's an interesting question. So like the fact that we have so much stuff encrypted, it's like, you know, that makes it harder, but because we're like protecting data, so, you know, like for the private pursuances, it's harder to see what some of the integrations would look like, and of course we don't, you know, like if a user doesn't know that like the person who made the pursuance has an integration that they don't know about, that's like uploading them to some third party's database, like there's privacy issues there. Like us dealing with kind of money that other people's pursuances are, you know, could get paid, but it's an interesting idea.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to take a break.
All right, can I
and
go
come
through,
back?
like, 2 more slides? And then
2 more slides.
2 more slides.
No way.
The thank yous.
More
we
slides.
just talked about karma points and people being intrinsically motivated. I need to thank all the amazing people who built Pursuance.
Okay, no, I won't give you the bum's rush by any means. I will let you finish, but then after that, we got 10 minutes, and I really want you guys to come back. I don't want you to miss the next talk, because it's Jason Leopold talking about FOIA, and he just got some fresh files in from the Secret Service on Aaron.
Awesome.
That he filed 2 years ago, and so I just want to make sure everybody comes back, okay? Promise you'll come back? Okay, then I will let you finish your talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to call out some amazing people involved here. Obviously, Barrett kicked everything off and has been thinking about this for like 8 years. I'm proud to be, kind of organizing a lot of stuff, adding some software features, designing things, trying to synthesize these, the ideas of all these brilliant people that are coming to Barrett and attracted to Pursuance in order to build something powerful. Annalise Burkhart did tons of research and worked on the trust system that we talked about earlier. We wouldn't be a nonprofit without her. Barrett and I are not amazing at filling out government paperwork, I would say. So having assistance with that, plus her ideas is awesome. Raymond Johansson, I mentioned him earlier. He knows thousands of activists all over the world, and he's been making it really easy to have this pool of people that are eager to kind of start using Pursuance. And because these amazing people hauled ass the last few weeks, we were able to start alpha testing. Thank you, Marty, who, core contributor, added a bunch to Leap Chat. You should have seen the ugly cartoonish wireframe things. And it'll look kind of like this, but not like gray and ugly and white. And he made it look awesome. Mohammed's here. Anytime you're auto-completing anything at all, like you. Yeah, you see that? Emojis, like the details that I demanded have it be, it's better than Slack. I swear those aspects are better than Slack, which is now valued at $5 billion. Valued at $5 billion for revolutionizing the way teams collaborate, and it's just a fucking chat room. It's the greatest chat room in the 40-year history of chat rooms. Still just a chat room, I gotta say. Sebastian Lindstrom, he's part of the team because Linda, who just asked not 1, not 2, but 3 questions, started Code Buddies. Anyway, I met him through there. He's in Sweden. He restructured all the code base so that we can have many more people collaborating or adding code at the same time without stepping on each other's toes. That was awesome. AJ's here. He, when you get an encrypted email from us, that will go through his code. We were brainstorming a bunch, and then Jim McGaw worked on Leap Chat and something that was actually before that, and we just copied and pasted some code from a previous thing that we did. Zen Peterson made the logo. Kevin Gallagher's doing a bunch of sysadmin stuff for us and technical design. The reason why we have 1,100 plus people on the mailing list and 1,400 Twitter followers, and Barrett has a couple thousand followers, is because of Barrett's writing and because Rain Coaster is awesome at social media, and she's helping us with our Kickstarter as well. Claire Peters did the policy research that I mentioned earlier, so we know the optimal country that your encrypted data should live in. Shadash, I mentioned earlier, he's masterminding about how all these different projects can be integrated in epic ways and is helping us with grant writing. And Soraya Kuda from EFF gave some very helpful UI advice on how to simplify things for users, which we care very much about. So, John Kiriakou blew the whistle on torture. He's on our board of directors. And here's a quote from an essay from Aaron Swartz that I wanted to close with. That is where he foresaw things that are similar to what we're trying to do. And he said, imagine this, an investigative strike team taking on an issue, uncovering the truth, and pushing for reform. They'd use technology, of course, but also politics and law. So he wanted us to have these cross-disciplinary teams. For one project, you leverage all the advantages of many different kinds of people. And that's one thing that Pursuance enables us to do. Barrett, I give you the floor. Final comments.
Thank you very much for coming. As I've noted earlier, this is something we've been working on for a long time, and it's something we'll be working on for a long time after this. This is something that everyone who's looked at it closely agrees is going to work. We need it now more than ever. We can't afford to wait another 5, 10 years and watch our institutions collapse. We have to start building the scaffolding around the building of state now. Scaffolding can be used to repair, to do renovations, take out pieces, and you can put nets on it so that when the building collapses, the bricks won't fall on people. This is what the Pursuance system is. Thanks again.
Thank you, Barrett. Awesome.
Thank you, Barrett.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Pursuanceproject.org/ASD. That URL's for you.
Yes, and also, I'm going to make you stay up there for a minute.
Sure.
What happened? I'm going to make you stay up there for a minute because this is where I make my pitch. So Steve is the guy that does privacy hackathons every Saturday. Have you missed a Saturday? Like,
Not since I flew to Texas, so I should tell you about that sometime.
okay. So he does these hackathons every Saturday at Noisebridge here in San Francisco, and we have the infrastructure with his stuff and with the people that I know to get speakers and stuff, and we're ready to help people all over the world have hackathons in their town and write stuff, and we got all these projects here that people are hacking on all weekend, and maybe they can just keep going. That's the idea, okay? So we're going to be back in 10 minutes with Jason Leopold.
Yep.
And
4 to 10 p.m. every Saturday at Noisebridge. I can, if you come to me or AJ or other people, I'm here when we give you a Bitly link that redirects you to like a page where you can create an account on our chat server, and there's different channels for different projects that we're working on. So, you know, like you said, there's half a dozen projects or so, and if you want your project to be integrated to like get more eyeballs on it, we're happy to do that. We actually had one Saturday hackathon that was dedicated to Secure Drop. That's an amazing project that we mentioned. And then Open Oversight is a police accountability project we had, which is also headed by Jen Helsby, who's awesome. So we did a Saturday hackathon kind of dedicated to that project as the official focus. But yeah,
right,
we're happy
Jen will be speaking. The idea is that a lot of people actually have a venue and they'll have food and everything, but they're afraid to throw a hackathon because they don't know if they have enough material. They don't know if they're going to be able to give people things to do. And so we are convinced that we have solved that problem. So, so spread the word on that count. Okay, take your badly needed break. There's food. There's going to be more food. And then we'll be back at 10 after 5. What time is it? There goes Barrett.
Scene from Hackers.
And
This is trash. Yeah, I remember the scene. Yeah.
And we'll be back in 10 minutes, whatever time that is. Somebody tell me what time it is.
5:03.
5:03. We'll be back here at 5:15. See you then.
All right. All right, thanks, guys. Boom.